Ohio State controlled Texas, winning 14-7. And look, coaching won the day. Adjustments won the game. That's what happened here. Texas outgained Ohio State. They outrushed Ohio State. They had even more passing yards than Ohio State. But Ohio State won. And at one point, they were up 14-0. At one point, it looked like Ohio State could win by double digits. And even though Texas had, I think, a valiant comeback effort, they came up short. Whether it was Arch Manning's inaccuracy, whether it was Ohio State's defensive front, especially their linebackers, Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese, who played exceptional, making key stops on fourth down. Ohio State made the plays. They made the adjustments. They made the proper play calls. They had the better game plan. They assessed things that they could exploit, things they could contain. They minimized their weaknesses and capitalized on their strengths. Before we resume this segment, please take a few seconds of your time to make sure you have liked the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for the channel and for any team podcasts and playlists linked in the description, and also comment your thoughts down below in the comment section and join my Discord server via the description. All of those things I just asked you to do are completely free, and they sign you up for things related to my channel, or they don't sign you up for anything. No cost to you, and all the benefit to you because we release daily college football content here on College Football with Sam. If you want to support the channel monetarily, sign up for a YouTube membership, or check any other links in the description for my merchandise store and Patreon page. Thank you very much, and let's get back to the segment. That is what elite staffs do. We talked about it in the preview, that while I believed Texas was the better team, that they would outgain Ohio State, that they would be bigger than Ohio State, that they would be even faster than Ohio State, and ultimately that they would win the line of scrimmage. And look, I think many of those things, if not all of those things, happened and or were true. Some of them are debatable. But regardless of that, I said that Ohio State's receivers matching up against Texas's DBs was a matchup in favor of Ohio State because Ohio State's receivers are so good that even an elite secondary has disadvantages against them. Texas's receivers against Ohio State's secondary, even with what some had as fair questions against the Ohio State corners, was not the same matchup because Emmett Mosley V was injured. Ryan Wingo is not this. He's not as good as even Carnell Tate or maybe even Brandon Inniss. Like, the difference between those receiver rooms is massive. That helps, especially when Sayin and his receivers are at home. Meanwhile, Manning and his receivers, with a disadvantage through the air, are on the road with a new O-line. And also, given last year's matchup, given how many times I've watched Ryan Day find ways to win in big ways, to blow out an opponent who should play Ohio State somewhat competitively, Oregon last year in the Rose Bowl, Clemson in 2020, for example, or how many times Ohio State has just shot themselves in the foot, their players, and Day finds a way to scheme them out of it. Day is a tactical genius. He is a tactical wizard. I don't think any of his weaknesses really relate specifically to his game management style or his overall understanding of the game, the way he treats his opponents, all those different things. His weaknesses, and we won't talk about that here because I don't think they showed many weaknesses in terms of game management. I think Ohio State's game plan by Hartline, Patricia, and Day were essentially perfect, as good as it can get. I don't think that there are any decisions they made that they really could take back and substitute in something better. I really don't. They coached circles around Texas. Day's weaknesses as a head coach don't have anything to do with the game that took place Saturday, which should be very encouraging to Ohio State because you just took down the number one team. If your head coach doesn't show any weaknesses playing the number one team, who's still number one in a lot of power ratings, that's a very good, you have a very good head coach. You have something special there. That game, in my mind, also solidified. This is another reason that I think maybe subconsciously I was more willing to pick Ohio State in this game than many others, even though, again, I thought that Texas entering this game was the better team. Urban Meyer loses this game. I genuinely believe that. Just look at the Oklahoma game in 17. Look at some of the dumbfounded losses late in his tenure. He loses this game. Day is a better football mind than Meyer. He is a better coach. He is a better tactician. He's better. And I think this game is a reason why. Take Steve Sarkisian, for example. Steve Sarkisian, I think, is a wonderful coach. I think that Sark actually does some things at Texas better than Day does at Ohio State. We're not going to talk about those because they're not really relevant to the game. But yes, I do think Sark has some edges over Day and more off-field, outside of game management type things. However, Sark has one win against the FPI top 10 in his career at Texas. Ryan Day is 15. Ryan Day is 15. 15 wins against the FPI top 10 in his Ohio State career. That is nuts. That's insane. And he does it through wonderful planning, does it through master motivation, does it with really a unique style of play where the meta has moved away from really a lot of spread, of tempo, of, having wonderful receivers and QBs and not caring about the ground game as much. It's moved away from that a little bit. Some would say backwards, but I would say forwards. There's still progress being made. It's just not in the direction that a lot of people who love high-scoring offense want it to be in. But Day's even made some adjustments there. And in other instances, he's stayed stubborn and said, yeah, we're going to continue to win with our wide receivers. And since he has Brian Hartline, and they've recruited and developed well, they've been able to win like they did Saturday in ways that a lot of teams can't win anymore. They have recruited so well at wide receiver that the next best wide receiver room I don't think is anywhere close to where they're at. They're unique in that way. If anyone else played Texas yesterday, I think minus maybe LSU and Penn State and maybe some of the other Big Ten schools who won in blowouts and they have the potential to be really good, but we have yet to see. So that's Oregon, maybe USC, though I don't think I'll go with USC yet. If most other teams in football played Texas yesterday, they get physically pounded and they lose. Ohio State didn't. And a huge credit of that is to Matt Patricia. But I think more importantly, it's actually due to Ohio State's offense. Texas entered with a new QB, new offensive line. They were down at receiver. Endries, their tight end, was an incoming transfer, and they weren't super deep there. And Sarkisian is known to shoot himself in the foot on fourth down and in the goal line. It's an absolute meme. So Patricia called a good game, a great game, but Sarkisian also, I think if he just called halfback dive or more runs with his running back, I don't think Ohio State's fourth down defense is as good as it was yesterday. I don't. However, Kwiatkowski and Texas's defense also called a really good game. And yet, despite holding Ohio State to 200 yards, Ohio State was able to get enough completions and get enough pass protection from their offensive tackles, who were elite yesterday, to get enough points to win at home in a key matchup. And now Ohio State's a lock to go to the playoffs because they aren't losing 3 games. Texas was one of their toughest tasks. Now they have Penn State, they have Michigan. There are some other games on the road that could prove to be problematic. But with Ohio State's talent and coaching, coordinator-wise, head coaching-wise, assistant-wise, they're not losing more than 2 of those games. This is a 10-2 team at worst. At best, there is a path to 12-0, definitely 11-1. When you look at how the stat line went, how the game went, again, circling back to the preview that we made in this game, Texas had 67 plays. Ohio State had 51. Now, Ohio State surprisingly was able to control the clock. That's something I wouldn't have predicted. And that's because an area where I was wrong about in this game is I thought that Texas would lead for most of the game and choke it away. And that Ohio State would eventually find something deep, hit a strike, and with superior red zone efficiency, which Ohio State has had with Day compared to Texas under Sark, they would eke it out. Ohio State still eked it out, but not in the way that I thought. If anything, the strong start and choking were almost reversed. Ohio State nearly blew the game, but they also started out fast and quickly established themselves in the first half and third quarter as the team on top of the wrestling on the wrestling mat. So Texas, at the end of the day, had to go away from what was working for them at times in the third quarter, which was the rushing offense. They had to go a little bit more up-tempo, quick to the line. They nearly, this was a very close game. If you switch a play or two, Texas wins. If you switch a play or two, like on that fourth down early in the game, which Ohio State missed, and Sayin hits an open Jeremiah Smith for a touchdown, it could be 21 Ohio State, Texas 7. It was a really close game between even teams. I would actually come away from 67 plays, 170 passing yards, and Texas running the ball sack adjusted for 4.6 yards per attempt compared to 2.9 for Ohio State. I'd come away saying that if these teams played in a neutral field, especially since they faced each other, I would probably now pick Texas to win, as someone who picked Ohio State to win this game. And I think that long term, Texas has more to unlock and a higher ceiling than Ohio State does. But Ohio State won, and Texas has some issues to figure out. Right now, I'd say that while Texas has the higher ceiling than Ohio State has the higher floor. I know what Ohio State is. I know they have an accurate quarterback, and that's not changing. I know that they have a great secondary. Same with Texas. That's not changing. I think that Texas is much stronger and deeper on the D-line than Ohio State is, and those things aren't changing, but with All-American linebackers that Texas has, they can mitigate that, especially with how Patricia likes to go, big nickel or likes to go 3-4, and I think with Peyton Pierce, they have the personnel to, they can take away a defensive lineman and add in a linebacker if they believe in that room more. It was a perfect game by Ohio State, and a game from Texas's standpoint that's filled with a bunch of what ifs. What if you hand it off to your running back on that fourth and goal from the 1-inch line? You probably get in. What if you run the ball instead of passing it on that 3rd and 3? You probably convert that down. Decision making, game management, play calling, these are things that I trusted Ryan Day with more than Sark, as I think he is a much better coach, and that panned out. And we hit the nail on the head there. Don't hit the nail on the head all the time. I mean, I was very wrong about Clemson LSU. Very wrong about that game. But here, I've been around Ohio State a ton, and I researched Texas a lot this preseason because I thought they were going to be a really good team, and they proved me wrong last year. These teams are who they told you they were on Saturday. Right now, defense is ahead of offense. I think especially with Texas, defense is ahead of offense. And when you look at the lines of scrimmage, when it mattered, I think both were pretty equal. Overall, I think Texas was better there. And when I say when it mattered, I mean Texas ran the ball well, but whether it was due to play calling or straight up performance, when they had to on a 4th down, they failed straight up. Outside of that first QB sneak that was very, very close. I was shocked they ran that second QB sneak after barely getting it the first time. Ohio State, they, on that 4th and goal, were able to come up big, thanks to really blocks from amazing tight ends, and then they didn't give up a sack all day. Ohio State, they were able to get some pressure on Manning, but the one sack they did get was Reese making a really good move and being an athletic player. I don't blame that too much on the Texas O-line. And Texas held up really well when Ohio State brought 4 and didn't send a ton of exotic pressure. So, and even when they did, Texas held up well. Like Texas forced Manning to progress through his reads and to try to pass the ball when you needed development through the air attack. For Ohio State, they moved the pocket around. They clearly told Sayin, you're taking 2 or 3 steps back, and you're not staying in the pocket for 2 or 3 more seconds, for 2 or 3 seconds or longer than that. You're getting out pretty quickly, and they did. That all goes back to coaching. Ohio State coached circles around Texas, and that plus their advantage at wide receiver was huge here. Texas was 5 of 14 on third down. Ohio State 3 of 12. The difference was Ohio State was 1 of 2 on fourth down. They didn't have to go for it all that much. Texas was 1 of 5. And I would also say that Ohio State at the end of the day won the field position battle. I was impressed with their punter, Joey McGuire. I thought Bomeister for Texas was better. But whether it was due to interceptions or stopping them on fourth down, I think Ohio State at the end of the day won the fundamental soundness battle, the field position battle, the coaching battle. They just straight up, they won the game, and they deserved that win. If you play that game over and over and over again, where they're meeting each other for the first time, Ohio State, I would say, wins every time in that matchup. Now, if they rematch, I think Texas then, because they made more mistakes and they have more room to improve, I think eventually Texas would start winning. But in this specific instance, Ohio State wins every time because they're at home, they're better coached, they had the more accurate quarterback, and their receivers, their receivers are getting held. And sometimes it was called, sometimes it wasn't. But those penalties helped them get into the position where they made it 7-0 at the half instead of it being 0-0. Texas didn't have that, and they probably won't for the rest of the year. They don't have anything close to Ohio State's wide receivers. The questions I have for this team are mainly, what's Manning's ceiling? Because that will ultimately decide what Texas is, and what is it realistically? I know in a absolute ceiling sense that Manning has one of the highest ceilings in the country, but how much can they actually unlock from that this year? That'll be very fascinating to see. And what I was concerned with yesterday was his inaccuracy, just how bad he was, skipping balls, throwing it high over players' heads, and he had some open guys. Ohio State mostly locked down Texas, especially deep, but he had some open guys on crossing routes or routes in the middle of the field, and he aimed it. He missed it. Sayan didn't have that problem. Sayan looked like a far better, more prepared quarterback than Manning. Maybe some of that was Ohio State's game plan being far superior. I hated Texas's plan in the first half. Second half, it was a little bit better, but play calling as they got closer to the end zone got worse, which we know this. This is what Texas has been under Sark in the red zone. And as for Ohio State, what is this team's ceiling? We'll ultimately have to see there. I mean, they looked good. They were the better team yesterday than Texas was. They straight up were. Overall and in the future, as I've said several times in this video, I think that you should not underestimate Texas. I think if these teams rematch in the playoffs, intuitively, I think Texas would win that game. Mostly because of roster. Coaching would still go to Ohio State. But I don't know that. That's like a projection that is way out in the future. Way out there. As for Ohio State, look, they had excellent pass protection, which as the preseason progressed, I thought they were going to have pretty great pass protection. Their receivers had drops. That's going to be fixed. You won't see that again. At least I don't think. And their secondary looked good. Corner was better than I thought it was going to be. Safety was as good as I thought it was going to be. And I have been very high on Arvo Reese since day one. I said very early on he'd be better than Sonny Styles. I think he already is, and Styles was still really good. But defensive line overall is right now probably as good as it's going to get because of the depth there. The longer the season goes on, the more teams learn about Patricia, who's still pretty new to the game, and you could tell that Texas wasn't very familiar with him. And the more injuries are likely to build up. Ohio State's D-line throughout the year, it's the same thing with the Texas O-line, by the way. Like, if Texas's offensive line suffers one more injury, that could cave the unit in. If Ohio State's defensive line suffers an injury, well, that unit's probably regressing. And the probability of that goes up as you play more games. So the D-line's probably not going to get much better as the year goes on. That probably has a limited ceiling based on how Texas's offensive line was able to beat them more times than not. And Texas's O-line is almost as new as the Ohio State D-line is. And they have far less talent in terms of blue chip ratio. And Ohio State's offensive line, I love tackle. I love their tackles. I mean, look, Phillip Daniels looked amazing against Colin Simmons, and Saravelda's a stud. The interior, we've seen Hinsman now for 3 years. He looks very similar. I don't like the interior of the offensive line, and I think many Ohio State fans can now see why I've been saying this. They are probably an okay run blocking team. They're not bad. People who think that the line is bad are wrong. They faced possibly the best front they'll play all year in Texas. But this is not a team that is going to be able to power run and have a ton of success with it. They'll have to mix it in. They'll have to keep you honest with the pass, and when they're going to have success in running the ball between the tackles, that's going to be because with their receivers, they're going to keep defenses in light boxes. When Texas stacked the box, Ohio State couldn't run. They couldn't run effectively. And when it was a light box, they still struggled to do it. The running back room has dropped off. That was expected. The interior O-line, I think, has a lower ceiling than a lot of people thought in the preseason. Like, I think there is a cap to that room that's lower than previous Ohio State interiors. But I don't think that's going to be a problem for Ohio State. I don't. Because this was the case in 2023. This was the case last year after McLaughlin was injured. 2023 Ohio State was 7 points away from winning it all. They beat Michigan. I'm convinced they beat Alabama and whoever else they play. And they won it all last year. Like, Ohio State does not need they don't even need a good interior O-line to win it all. They just need an average one, and they have that. You look at Texas, I'm concerned with, I wouldn't just say I'm concerned with quarterback, though that is a huge concern. But receiver, I think that, Wingo, not everything was on him, but he didn't get open as much as maybe I thought he did. Now, Ohio State's secondary, I give credit to them there, a ton of credit. However, I wonder if Texas is really that limited in pass offense, and if that doesn't change, I think Georgia has a better defensive front than Ohio State does. I think there's a chance Florida has a better D line, not defense. Their linebackers and safeties and corners are nowhere near Ohio State's. But Florida State with Sapp and Banks could have a better D line than Ohio State does. And the swamp is going to be just as hostile, especially since it's at night. And Oklahoma has a mean defensive front and also a mean secondary. So they are going to be tested, and the tests are going to be very harsh if they don't find key improvement on the offensive side of the ball. Coaching ultimately decided it. They called the superior game. Right now, I'd say Sayin is better than Arch. Brian Hartline deserves his flowers here. Same with Patricia, but Patricia and Kwiatkowski, the defenses have been the talk, so I want to flip it to the offense here. Hartline was the play caller. He called the game, he called it pretty well, and he knew what he had to do to win, and he made sure to try to feed his X factors, the wide receivers. And that's ultimately what decided it. So Brian Hartline, excellent first game as an offensive coordinator. Texas won the line of scrimmage, but it wasn't decisive enough to where it helped them win the game. It helped them stay in the game that they were winning, but since they weren't averaging, say, 7 yards per carry on the ground, and they, weren't so excellent in pass protection that even with exotic blitzes, they were always picking up assignments, it didn't help them win the game. It was good enough to give them a chance to win, but they just won the line of scrimmage. That's all. They didn't dominate there. In a similar way for the overall game, that Ohio State won the air attack but didn't dominate there, but they dominated when it mattered. And by the time that Texas finally was in rhythm passing the ball, they were down 14-0 late in the fourth quarter and it was just too late. And obviously both of these defenses are elite. I'm excited to see these teams moving forward. They obviously have big tests here in a few weeks. Ohio State going to Washington, you best believe that'll be an interesting test with the travel. And I think that Texas going to Florida is going to be a pretty big test, not just with the travel, but for both of those teams, the environments they'll be playing in and the home crowds and quarterbacks they'll be facing off against, huge tests. Kudos to Ohio State for winning. That was an amazing coaching job. Ohio State's guaranteed their spot in the college football playoff and are national champions, one of the best teams, if not maybe the best team in football right now. Texas can be that. They can, but they're not a lock for the playoffs right now. They started off 0-1. Believe me, they have 2-3 more losable games. They got to go back to the drawing board and find something to change, something to improve on, so that way they can be in the college football playoff when December comes around. Thank you for watching College Football with Sam. Make sure that you've liked the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for the channel and team playlists and podcasts in the description, join the free Discord server where we talk college football 24/7, and have commented your thoughts down below. Check out the description for any ways you can support the channel monetarily. Everything else I've asked you to do is completely free, and your support means the world to me. We're trying to become the next big thing on college football YouTube. 6-figure subscribers, maybe 1 million one day. I think we can do that. And also check out any videos or playlists, anything in these columns right here, where there will be videos and playlists. Yeah, you get the point. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one.